Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing our weekly shirim on the inner world of Simcha, on the inner world of happiness. And we're going to go a step deeper into the reality that we live in order to find the realistic pathways towards happiness. What we've been talking about so far, and what we'll continue to talk about, is how happiness is available to us when we transform the somethingness of reality into the nothingness of the divine source and vitality that's at the core of every ounce of reality. That by uncovering the ayin, uncovering the capital N nothingness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite presence and infinite light, that is so infinitely present and so infinitely light that it can't be felt or identified by way of external investigation, that's ever present at the core of each and everything. When we attach ourselves to ayin, when we attach ourselves to chachma, to the space within the mind that enables the self to nullify itself entirely, to let go of the particular frame of subjective orientation that we live with, and to enter into the fluid stream of the mayim ha'elyonim of chachma that carries a person up into unity. A person can forget themselves for a second. To forget the self and tap into the no self, to reveal the ever-present light of ayin that's present everywhere. That no matter how particularized reality looks, we have the ability to affirm HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence by way of emunah. We don't need to prove it. We don't need to identify it. We don't have to bring proof to it. We simply have to enter in by way of emunah. Emunah is a strength, a gift within the soul that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed within us that enables us to live with a wisdom beyond knowing, that we can know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us in every place. That's ayin, that's nothingness, that's ein od milvado. And that chachma, that recognition of koach ma, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the vitality and the source and the basis and the foundation and the fulfillment and the surrounding of all things. So in that place, yispardu kol po'alei aven, all disintegration, all symptoms, they fall away because a person is living with a perspective of ayin. The way that this reveals itself is by the forgetting of the self, letting go of that self-orientation, stop thinking about the self, the end of contemplating what does this mean for me and how do I feel about it, or what's going to be with me in the future, or what was with me in the past. All of the I-oriented perspectives that are rooted in Bina and this worldliness, we forget them, we let go of them, and we enter into this place of divine light and well-being, which through the human being's conjuring of all of the goodness available, pleasure and goodness and relief and alignment and oneness and at ease, and love and connection, all of it exists there in the fullest possible expression. That's the ayin that the mind has to begin to enter into. And when we can enter into that place, and it's the aura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's the recognition that all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to do is to bestow goodness, and the world is good, and life is good, and there's an affirmation at the core of everything. We enter into that place, and through that chachma, through that sense of nothingness and self-nullification, we enter into a place of simcha, into joy. So that's what we've been talking about, how by transforming this worldliness into a place of nothingness and revealing the nothingness at the core of this worldliness, by living from the elevated perspective of the awareness of divine vitality and all rightness and meaning, so that's how a person is able to alleviate the burden of this world and they're able to enter into joy. And we spoke about how this chachma, this ayin, this nothingness that's the root source of all things, is not separate from this worldliness. It's not separate from the yesh. It's not separate from our particularized encounters with this worldliness, but rather it's the very source of the yesh. The secret of yesh me'ayin, of something emergent from nothingness, brings us face to face with the paradox that is present in our lives at every single moment. That on the one hand, there's nothing more distant from the nothingness at the source than the somethingness at the outset, at the expression, that this worldliness and its somethingness and its physicality and its congealment and its thickness and its darkness is the farthest thing imaginable from divine vitality, from the ayin ha'elyon, from the nothingness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's simple unity and light of all rightness. But at the same point, unlike something that was developed by way of a chain reaction of cause and effect, yesh and somethingness is a sudden appearance out of its opposite, meaning there's no way to understand how yesh exists other than by leaning into and attaching ourselves to the ayin that's at the root of it at each and every second. By dint of its distance from the divine nothingness, we also have to come upon the awareness that the very thing that's giving life to this distance is divine nothingness itself. And we come to find the ayin, the nothingness at the core of yesh. And that's going to be what enables us to live a life of joy, what enables us to live a life of ease and all rightness and expansivity. And so that's what we've spoken about before, that joy comes from transforming yesh into ayin. And the way in which we do this, the way we start off, is by affirming ayin at the beginning of the day. By waking up and saying, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, moida ani lefanecha. The radical affirmation beyond judgment of goodness that rests at the core of all things. That's the attaching ourselves to chachma. That's the remembering the world to come. Deciding, even before we encounter the day and its changes, to live within a space of maintaining a sense of divine nothingness, of the ayin ha'amiti. May ayin yavo ezri, to live every moment with the mind attached to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ta'anoichi Hashem Elokecha. To the Shem Havaya of Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, to live mitzad ha'elyon, to live with an inner vision at the core of all separation, that there's simply one thing and one thing alone, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is revealing itself to me at every moment by way of the Shem Havaya. And the Shem Havaya means two separate things which are one on top of the other. The first interior meaning of Shem Havaya is that Hashem is Hova Tmidi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ever present, and in fact all of existence is only emanatory from within that ever-present nature of divine presence. The Hova HaTmidi, the never not present undulating light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude. It was always already there, never not there. And in order to be able to grasp that innermost core of Hashem's ever-present presencing of his presence, there's going to be the secondary explanation of the Shem Havaya, which is the Haya Hoiva Enihia, that which was, that which is, and that which will be. And this is what it means, Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, that a Yid has to perpetually reorient themselves and reattach themselves to that innermost presence of all things, which is remembering the world to come at the outset of the day. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, and in spite of the fact that the world appears to be multiple and disunified, there is a oneness at the core of all things. That's the simcha. That's the chashma. That's sensing the ma. What am I? What is any of this other than you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Simcha is also Sham Chaf Hey. Chaf Hey not only is Rosh Tevos of Chachmas HaEmuna, it also expresses itself in the sound of a laughter, as the old tzaddikim of Breslov used to say, like cha cha, that Ches Hey is Chachmas HaEmuna, but Ches Hey is also the gematria of 13. So we can say that Simcha is Sham Chaf Hey. It's not my word. It's a Torah from, I believe, the Kuzmir tzaddikim. That Sham Ches Hey is over there. There's 13. There's Achdus. There's Ahava. There's oneness. That joy is dependent upon the awareness of divine oneness. And so we have to set that up as our preconditioned mindset of the day. That's what we've said so far. But now we're going to now speak as if we're living mitzad hayesh. So, okay, we understand that it's very important to live with an awareness of chachma, and that the ayin is ever present, and I can tap into it and lean in on ein on milvado and experience the simcha, the relief that comes from feeling that I don't have to do anything and that everything is exactly as it needs to be, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. But what happens when a person can't tap into that bittul on the level of ayin? What happens when a person can't enter into bittul b'metzias, where I let go of this worldliness and I tap into the nothingness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I close my eyes deep enough to see through the concealment of this world and to live in the blackness of divine revelation that's so bright and all-encompassing that it can only appear as something that can't be grasped by the mind, metaphorically related to as darkness, but it's a darkness that is so saturated with meaning and purpose and light that even though we can't grasp it, we relate to it. What happens when I can't live in that place of ayin? When I can't be mevata myself by way of chachma? What happens when I find myself, in other words, stuck in the yesh? What happens when I find myself in this worldliness and try as I might? I can't get back to ayin. I can't climb back to that place of divine nothingness. I know chachma is a thing. I know that koach ma. I know yichud ilah. I know that all that exists is Hashem. But what I'm experiencing is a world of changes and a world of particularization and a world of bina. A world of yeshus, a world that appears to be very real and has a halachic status of being real. And because it's a real world, there's real feelings and real experiences and real people and real mishaps and real breakthroughs and all of the changing colors of this worldliness. The Avnei Shayesh Tahor, it's so much yesh, there's so much somethingness in this world. And when a person finds themselves stuck in that place, and it doesn't take much to be stuck in that place. That's our typical orientation model. To look out onto the world and see physicality is to assume that physicality is real. In order to reach into that unnatural place of chachma, I have to be mevatel this world. I have to erase this world. I have to run back into ayin. But left to my own devices, I wake up in the morning and yesh hits me in the face. Existence is there waiting for us. If I'm like David HaMelech and I wake up before the morning and I preset my orientation for the day, which is the chachma and the bittul and the ayin, so that's one thing. Hu yo'ir hashachar, I wake up the day. But let's say I'm feeling lethargic or tired, or I don't have the koach today, then the day wakes me up and the day knocks hard on the door as a yesh, as somethingness. And when a person lives in somethingness, we know what happens. We find ourselves scattered. We enter into the domain of separation, Rishus Harabim, where there's so many voices and noises and things that are vying for our attention, and it's very difficult to maintain a sense of unified happiness in a place like that. In a world of yesh, more often than not, the reality is one of atzvas and marish chayra, sadness and despondency, rooted in the transiency of this worldliness. It's not a wonder. This world is not yet revealed to be the potent light that it is, and as such, any attachment to it in an unhealthy way or in an addictive way is going to bring about heartache and pain. Atzvas and marish chayra, each person according to their own levels of experience. So when a person lives in yesh, when a person finds themselves unable to enter into that place of ayin, or those moments where ayin is not sparking for me, I'm not able to enter in fundamentally to that place of enon movado, I'm not able to erase the self. The self feels too intense at this moment. I can't erase it. The attachment feels too real and too strong that I can't bring my mind to a place of unity. So what happens then? Phrased in the language of Hasidus, the level of chachma that we've been talking about, running into ayin, is called bittul b'metzias, living with a perspective of ayin at the core of all things, where I don't exist, where my separation and my symptoms of individual struggles and pain is not part of the equation because I've closed my eyes to that reality. And with enough practice, it's possible for a person to be able to do that on a regular basis for any given amount of time that they so choose, to cultivate a meditative mindset and to build walls of the mind that protect them from their subjectivity, to enter into a place of self-nullification by way of contemplating godliness. And Eidon Movado, it's very possible. That's bittul b'metzias. That's when a person is nullifying themselves in the light of ayin. But when a person finds themselves stuck in this worldliness, in the yesh of it all, in the attachments and the issues and the unfinished tasks and the unaccomplished tasks, etc., all of the stuff. So in that place, a person feels like a yesh. A person is still feeling like an individualized thing. And as an individualized thing, we're a separation to the flow. To be an individual, to have a subjective orientation, is to have separated oneself from the natural flow of the natural order. Originally, from a Stoic perspective, joy was seen as being at one with the natural flow of reality. But to be human and to have consciousness is, at its very core, antagonistic to the natural flow of reality. The Ben Adam is unique by dint of the fact that we have the capacity of choosing and thinking and developing meaning. An animal in its simplicity has the capacity to be joyous to the degree that it has what it has and it's experiencing a sense of wholeness. That's the natural order of things. But the human being is born with a sense of deficiency and always wanting to grow, and that takes us out of the flow of life, which theoretically situates the reality of this worldliness as the opposite of joy, as a place of atzvus and marish chayra. And so when a person is encountering yesh and a person continuously is getting stuck within the self-orientation of things, where we're burdened down by whatever it is that's burdening us down, the avodah is not bittul b'metzias. The avodah is not to enter into a place of complete and utter self-nullification in the face of nothingness. The job is bittul hayesh. The job is learning to work with my human condition, learning to figure out how in this place, in this yesh that I'm feeling right now, in this separation, in this fragmentation, in this disorientation, in the boredom, in whatever symptom is emergent within the individual's life. And most of us go through the full gamut of symptoms on an hourly, daily basis. Anytime the thought emerges, that's the symptom appearing. And to be human in this world is sometimes to fight against those symptoms and to transform the yesh itself into a place of experiencing joy. It can't be, it can't be that the only way to find joy in this world is to escape up into ayin, because that would be cruel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It would be cruel of Hashem, so to speak, if he said true joy is going to be found in nothingness alone. And I'm going to send you down into a place of abject somethingness, of yesh, so that you can nullify yesh, get rid of your perspective or your subjective orientation to somethingness and reality, and jump back into absolute nothingness. That wouldn't be fair, because theoretically, not everybody's capable of doing that, or not every moment is susceptible to that type of entrance. But we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only bestows good, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not sending us down into a place of sadness. Even though the world appears to be a place of concealment and sadness, he's not sending us into a place of sadness. Sadness is the opposite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Getting stuck in despondency and hopelessness that's rooted in the addiction to self, that's the opposite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's not what Hashem wants from us. So it has to be that if he sent us down into this place of yesh, of bina, of separation, and he knows that there's going to be times where we're not able to jump back into ayin, that there also has to be a way of uncovering the fount of simcha within bittul hayesh itself, within bina itself. That yes, to run back to nothingness is to uncover that place of Hashem, it's only you, and it's always been you, and it's never been me, and it's never going to be me, and it's only you at every moment. Yes, that can alleviate one's burdens for a moment. But there's also going to have to be a way of alleviating the burdens and finding joy and uncovering the fount of simcha and shleimus, even in Olam Hazeh, even in this world. The Mittler Rebbe and Shai Tshuva, and the Mittler Rebbe, very, very often, because he was one of the tzaddikim who spoke most potently about this, the Mittler Rebbe adds something very important, that in addition to the fact that there's a way of finding joy in this world also, not only by running up into ayin, but by experiencing bittul hayesh in this world and working with ourselves and trying to overcome ourselves each and every moment. That even though it appears to be a lower level, a yichud tata type of level, a way of dealing with this worldliness and the dispersion of this worldliness, when in truth we should really be dealing with the unity of above, it feels like it's a secondary way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It feels like we're doing the wrong thing, that really we should be running all the way up into ayin. There's a dispensation that the Torah gives me that even when I find myself stuck in yesh, I'm able to uncover vestiges of joy, but nevertheless, that's not where a person should be. So the Mittler Rebbe, following the teachings of his father, the Baal HaTanya, as expressed throughout the teachings of Hasidus, says that the opposite is true. Even though that bittul hayesh, even though that being in this world and trying to subjugate the world to godliness and trying to find my wits to me when I'm stuck in the traffic jams of this world, even though it appears to be a more degraded form of divine service because I'm stuck within my own most subjectivity, and I'm stuck within dispersion, and I'm not operating from a perspective of divine nothingness. Nevertheless, at its core, this descent down into the particularization and the sadness-inducing separation of this world is in fact a far loftier form of Avodas Hashem than even Bittul HaMetzius is by Chachma. That the descent down into this world is ultimately enabling us to reveal an even deeper form of joy, to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light specifically from the side of separation and fragmentation, and all of the things that take us away from joy, all of the expectations and the considerations and the projections and the worries and the responsibilities that weigh upon a person, and the emptiness, all of the different flavors of experience that seem to chip away at a person's deep sense of abiding well-being and calmness, the things that keep us stuck in this world. In truth, when we're able to draw calmness down into those places, when we're able to regulate ourselves and remember joy from within the midst of life itself, it reveals such a potency of light, it reveals such a unique nature of spiritual revolution that it's the ultimate purpose of creation. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this place specifically, this low, low place that seems to be the opposite of joy. Not in any despondency-inducing way, just the metzias of the Welt, the nature of reality. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it in such a way because he wants us to engage mitzad hayesh itself. That there's going to be times, not always, but there's going to be moments in a person's life where we can't enter into ayin, where we can't enter into nothingness. And we're going to have to figure out how to draw happiness down into somethingness itself. Now, this ability to draw happiness into human experience, the day-to-day life, when I'm no longer operating in that mindset of bittul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but rather I'm operating from the perspective of that I'm a person in a world, and there's struggles in the world, and there's issues in the world, and the world is like a maze, and I have to make my way through it. It's a pre-existing battle, as the Mesilas Yesharim describes very poignantly and succinctly and profoundly modernly when describing the human condition at the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, is that this place is really hard, and there's very often no possibility of uncovering true joy in this world, at least at first glances. And so the question is, how do we uncover joy in that place? And for that, we have to come upon the tzaddik, the Nachal Novei Makor Chachma, Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, or Rabbi Nachman ben Simcha. As the Chasidei Breslov would say, we don't have anything other than the words of the child of Simcha. Ein lanu ela divrei ben Simcha. And Rabbi Nachman is the one who comes and teaches us how specifically from the perspective of somethingness and this worldliness, we can also encounter the deep levels of joy. Rabbi Nachman explains that the true expression of simcha, the truest expression of happiness, is that when a person is encountering this world and we come across something that is causing us a certain feeling of despondency, something that weighs us down, an issue that has not yet been dealt with, a lingering burden that we carry with ourselves, that when it's activated, it floods the mind with a certain sense of helplessness or listlessness or forlornness. That we all have various things that on a day-to-day basis seem to arise within our minds or our circumstances that take us away from a posture of well-being, joy, contentment, alignment, and all rightness. Now, those things can be a myriad of examples. Each person knows exactly what it is that takes them away from that inner mindset of joy. Again, joy here is the deep sense and the abiding sense that all is all right and everything is okay and everything is present and I don't need to fix or do anything, but I can abide here and now. And sadness and despondency is ultimately this ever-present sense of responsibility and how much I need to fix and how much needs to be done, even though I don't know what needs to be done in order to accomplish, even though I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be the birthplace of atzvus. And so at first glance, it would appear that, okay, we live in a mixed bag of a reality. We live in a mixed world where there's moments of enoughness, moments of joy, and moments of emptiness or lack, and moments of sadness. And that we should cut our losses and just choose those moments of joy, choose to feel good when we feel good, and when we don't feel good, and when we don't feel like things are aligned, and we don't feel like we're safe or that we're grounded, which are the basic requirements for a mindset of joy, that we should deal with that because that's the nature of reality. And so at best, we have the ability to push them away, to repress them, to ignore them. And even though my day might be a scattered mixture of moments of happiness and moments of sadness, nevertheless, I just want to look at the happy moments and I want to ignore the bad moments. I want to just not pay attention to them. I'm in pain when they happen. I don't deal with them and I don't spend too much time thinking about them. But Rabbi Nachman says that's not the way. That's most certainly not the way. All of the tzaddikim say that's not the way. There are times, yes, where we have to put those moments of sadness on the side and not pay attention to them. But ultimately, the goal is to force those moments of sadness to reveal themselves as well as pockets of joy. To draw the sadness into the circle of joy, not to dance a happy dance with the sadness sitting on the side because it doesn't want to enter in. but rather to open up the circle of the happy dance to ensure that those sad elements of the self are included within that dance. That happiness has the ability to break down borders, it has the ability to burst forth across boundaries. And the fundamental expression of happiness is not simply a happiness that's devoid of a sadness, but rather a happiness that has such a potency to it that it can express itself into the territory of sadness and force sadness to admit to the joy. Because the sense of happiness, a sense of shlemus, is a sense of divine nothingness. The all-inclusive unity of all things in the sense that everything is all right and everything is good and everything is only going to get better. The radical system of faith that each and every one of us have by way of a pre-existing condition of faith. When we find ourselves operating in yesh, when we find ourselves in a place of somethingness, in this low place, so the job is to continue to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity even in that situation. Even though I can't necessarily feel it, even though I can't necessarily see it, even though I'm not experiencing the benefits of bittul, I don't feel that natural sense of at-easement. I don't feel that abiding sense of the oceanic sense of well-being that moments of contemplation of divine oneness provide me with. Adarab, I feel the opposite. I feel stress. I feel my blood pressure rising. I feel anxiety. I feel this, that, or the other thing. But the mind has the capacity that even though it's not able to access the well-being that joy provides, it can choose to operate within the framework of joyfulness, where the mind itself resists sadness and it chooses to linger instead of running away from the sadness of this moment, instead of running away from what feels to be the opposite of joy and divine unity. Instead of turning my head from it and pretending that I could just repress it, I gaze slightly deeper into it with confidence and with a yira, with a deep sense of knowledge that Hashem, you're here also. And when I'm in that moment, even though I'm not experiencing the feelings of well-being and I'm experiencing those triggers, the mind has the ability to choose not to be carried away by those thoughts. The mind has the ability to choose which course it wants to go down, just because there's sadness that is emergent within the mind, triggered by a sad external reality of brokenness and chaos, doesn't mean that the innermost kernel of the mind needs to go down all of those circuitous routes of anxiety and sadness. Because the true source of meaning making and the true source of the energy in which our mind has the capacity of framing itself is the nekuda of chachma, is that innermost point of chachma that is now descending down into the territory of bina. Even though it feels that we've lost chachma, even though it feels that we've descended away from nothingness because we can't feel it, nevertheless, what's truly happening is that chachma, that power of self-nullification in totality, is extending itself downwards into its opposite territory where I feel myself most intensely. And it's available there for me still. It's always readily available for me to uncover and draw down into this moment. If I arm myself with the wisdom of Chachma, of Ayin, and I drag it down into the Yesh, and I drag it down into my world of particularization, the world of particularization still exists. That light of Ayin is not yet potent enough to erase this worldliness from me. I'm not living mitzad ha'ayin. But I can draw down the vestige, the remainder, the irreducible trace of divine nothingness that exists no matter what and no matter where. And I can live with the memory of it, even though I'm not feeling in it. And I can be in yesh in that way. And I can remember that Hashem is good. And I can remember the joy. I can remember the well-being. I can remember the unity that I felt. And I can borrow from that memory. I can live according to the remaining hues of that memory. That's the secret of drawing ayin into yesh, of being mahapech yesh itself, of finding HaKadosh Baruch Hu down here, even in the struggle of it. Now, Rabbi Nachman explains that this world is populated by all forms of concealment and impurity and struggle and difficulty and extra and things that appear meaningless. That's what's referred to as the ketoras, as this harsh smelling spice that is emergent from this admixture of 11 spices, 11 being a number that exceeds the unity of 10, that represents a certain chaotic overflow and disorderly nature. But at the same point, in spite of the fact that there's this intensity and a pungency that the Ketores brings into the picture, which represents severity and concealment and sadness-inducing separation, the Ketores also represents a vehicle for uncovering the deepest levels of joy imaginable. Ketores is associated with joy. It brings joy to the hearts of men. It brings joy to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a reach nichoach. It's revealed on Purim to be the very site of the deepest revelations from within the concealment. And so in describing this paradox, Rabbi Nachman explains in the 24th teaching that this world is populated by separation of all sorts. And at first glance, that spells sadness, that spells scatteredness, that spells separation, a sense of overwhelm and a sense of chaos, which is the opposite of joy and well-being. And to sweeten the Ketores, to rectify the Ketores, is to dig down deep into the separation, to dig down deep into the apparent constriction, into that place that smells like death sometimes, and to uncover that singular ray of divine light that exists there, that abides there, that is ever present there, that is never not there. It's always giving vitality and enlivening that place. And when I uncover that line of divine light, I'm not saying at this point all of the sadness, all of the elements of the Ketores, all of this worldliness is nothing but the revelation of God. I'm not living in that place of Chachma yet. But what I am saying is that somehow, some way, and I'm not quite sure how, and I'm not quite sure when I'm going to understand, but somehow all of these various parts, all of these various spices that appear to be so separate from one another and so disintegrated from one another, they're all fundamentally connected to a hidden thread of unity that's going to be revealed in the future, that's going to bring about a profound level of joy. The avodah of the Ketores is not yet negating separation, pretending that this worldliness and its constriction doesn't exist, but it's descending down into the constriction of yesh and somethingness and self-interest and ego and all of the things that take us away from divine light and unity and joy and well-being. And it's ensuring that even though we don't feel the light of unity there, we never stop believing and proclaiming and verifying the fact that unity is still there. That's the avoid of the Ketores. That, says Rabbi Nachman, is doing mitzvos b'simcha. What are mitzvos? Mitzvos are this worldliness. This worldliness. The Torah is the next world. The Torah is a light of joy and ever-present divine light. The mitzvah, on the other hand, is something that is originating from within this worldly fragmentation. The active participation in the physical reality of a world that appears to be separate and apart from the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a place of theoretical sadness from the get-go. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to us the capacity of doing a mitzvah. What's doing a mitzvah? There's 613 mitzvahs, but at the core, all of the mitzvahs are emanations of a singular principle, which is tzaddik be'emunaso yichya, that it's the emunah that gives life in that place. The emunah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ever-present goodness. That's what enables me to encounter physical reality, individuated reality, separation, my sense of self and fragmentation, all of the things that might take me away from a natural sense of joy, and to transform them into asiyas ha-mitzvos b'simcha. Of doing mitzvos b'simcha means that I am engaging in this worldliness, and I'm drawing the light of ayin down into it, and I'm uncovering the latent potential of that joy, even though I don't feel it yet. And in that, we elevate ourselves slowly but surely. When we begin to pretend of entering into joy and we engage in that work of the bittul, slowly but surely, there's an endlessness. There's a light that begins to ascend from this constricted place, and yesh is going to be transformed into ayin. And then somethingness goes back up into chachma, and it experiences that well-being once again. The only way to do this in this world, says Rabbi Nachman, the only way to uncover the sparks of joy that can be found within selfhood, within yesh, within living in this world, is going to be through yishuv hadas, through the settling of the mind, from a calm mind, a mind that doesn't feel like it's being chased, and a mind that doesn't feel like it's chasing, a mind that doesn't feel like it needs to protect itself against hidden or revealed threats, a mind that has trained itself enough to not necessarily pay attention to every thought that emerges in the circuitry of the mind, a mind that has uncovered the innermost quality of bechira, which is the capacity to choose to orient ourselves in a particular way in this world. Like we said, that besimcha is osios machshava, that thought and joy are fundamentally connected to one another. And the only way to bring about joy and calmness in this world is going to be through Yishuv Hadas, through the settling of the mind. In Rabbi Nachman's language, it's as follows. We see that the world is very far from Hashem. In our language, it's what we've been discussing. It's a world that appears separate and devoid from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be in a world of yesh, to be in a world of somethingness. And it's very difficult for people to come close to God, to uncover the light of love and attachment in this world. But the reason for that, says Rabbi Nachman, is only because we lack Yishuv Hadas, only because we lack a settled mind, a calm mind that's centered itself and knows what its strength is. But because we don't have Yishuv Hadas, we don't settle ourselves, and we feel like we're under a state of chaotic rumbling. The main thing that we have to do in this world, says Rabbi Nachman, is to engage in the effort to learn how to calm ourselves down in a very clear way, and to clarify for ourselves the purpose at the core of all things, and the core of all of the temptations of this worldliness, and all of the bodily attachments of this worldliness, whether it be my bodily considerations or even my psychological considerations. If I actually settle my mind and think about what is it that's pulling me in 1,000 different directions, and I can find Yishuv Hadas and I can open myself up to a settled mind, then certainly I'll be able to uncover the light of Hashem in this place. But, says Rabbi Nachman, even though the only way to access this innermost light of Emunah, which is the revelation of divine unity, even within the vestiges of separation and subjectivity and stuckness, but that I can still live with an inner quality of ever knowing joy, even though I don't feel it. The only way to do that is through Yishuv Hadas. But if I'm in this world, how am I going to have Yishuv Hadas? If I'm already operating in a place of Bina, if I'm stuck within a place of fragmentation, what exactly is going to enable me to get that place of settledness, that place of a settled mind that enables me to choose to see Emunah? Because theoretically, if I could do that on my own, then I wouldn't be struggling with the sadness. So here's what Rabbi Nachman says. He says that we have to understand that in spite of the fact that Yishuv Hadas and a settled mind is literally the most important thing, nevertheless, as the result of despondency and sadness, of being overwhelmed, which is the root source of that collapse, which leads to that depressive position, as a result of depression, as a result of marish chayra, despondency, lowliness, operating from a perspective of separation, a person doesn't have the ability to regulate their mind. The person cannot direct their minds towards where it is meant to go. The mind is a place of freedom when operating properly. The mind is the medicine. The mind is the ability to think God. And by thinking God, I draw God down into my mind. And when God is trapped within my mind, he's revealed throughout the entire landscape of existence, from the heart to the body to everywhere. But when a person is in a state of despondency, it's very difficult to direct the mind in the way that we need it to go. And because we can't direct the mind, we feel that the mind has a mind of its own and it's running on its own on autopilot and ruminations. It's very difficult for a person to settle their mind. So how is a person going to settle their mind? Says Rabbi Nachman, it's only going to be through joy. Only through simcha that a person is going to have the ability to recapture and re-regulate their mind. Only through joy is a person going to be able to restore their capacity to settle their mind once again. Because joy is the world of freedom. As the pasuk says, that it's with joy that you're going to go out from exile. That joy creates a certain freedom within the individual that enables them to leave the exile of the moment. And when a person connects this joy to their mind, then their mind and their wisdom are free to think what they would like. And they're no longer operating in a state of autopilot exile. And at that place, the mind has freed itself from the confines of that perpetual ruminative state. And now we have the ability to direct our minds in the way that we want and to settle our minds, because our mind is free and it's no longer operating in a state of exile. Because the essential form of exile is the inability to have a settled mind. Rabbi Nachman says in a tautological way, what else can you do? The only way to settle the mind is to choose to tap into that pre-existing state of simcha. I'm not operating in a place of simcha. This simcha is not the same simcha of the bittul of chachma. This simcha is not the simcha that emerges from the fundamental awareness of divine unity at the core of all things. I'm not holding in that place. This simcha is of a different sort. This is a simcha that is a pre-existent condition that I know of in spite of the fact that I'm not feeling it. And even though I'm not feeling it, this wisdom of drawing simcha down into the world of separation and sadness itself is my ability to remember the framing of simcha, even though I'm not feeling the content of simcha. And then eventually, by framing my life through simcha, I'll free myself enough to be able to experience and return back to the true source of simcha. That's the language that Rabbi Nachman uses, that when a person attaches this simcha to their mind, then their mind is free. Wait a second, isn't simcha in the mind? What does it mean to attach simcha to the mind? And so I believe that when a person is operating in a state of chachma and bittul b'mitzias, so then the simcha is in the mind. It's simchas Hashem. It's the simcha that we have through bittul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But over here, when a person is operating in a place of bilbul hadas and this worldliness, that simcha is not fundamentally in the mind. It's actually above in the world of chachma. I could only see it from afar. It feels very far from me. But I can attach myself to it, and I can draw that simcha down into where I'm at right now, into my moyach as it feels right now. And in so doing, I have the ability of freeing myself from exile. Shemakasher simcha el hamoyach. When I attach my mind to simcha, what is simcha if something that's not in the mind actively? But we're seeing here that simcha exists up there in the realm of chachma, and we have the ability to draw it down into bina, even if we're not feeling it. And Rabbi Nachman continues that the way of doing this, the essential way of uncovering the light of simcha with a settled mind, is choosing to see goodness in reality, is choosing to radically affirm goodness over and over and over again. Wherever I find myself in this worldliness, however I find myself, there's always an opportunity for me to just be besimcha, even if it's milei deshtusa, as we're going to speak about. In this place of unconsciousness, in this place of concealment, in this rishus harabim, very often, the only thing that sparks the conditions of joy necessary to free our minds is a joy that is independent of all things, the joy of being human, the joy of being a yid, the joy of being able to say, Ashreinu matov chalkeinu manayim gorelenu, how wondrous is our lot, Rabbeinu Shalom, irrespective of anything that I do. It's the base joy at the fount of the self. That's the most basic access point. Milei deshtusa, Rabbi Nachman refers to it as casting off our minds entirely and rolling around in the mud, if that's what it takes for us to be able to spark joy and well-being in our lives. I just want to read some words from the Baal HaTanya now, whose yahrzeit it was yesterday. It describes this fundamentally at the end of Parak Lamed Gimel, right? About why, even though the true joy and the true source of happiness is rooted in the bittul of chachma, of self-nullification in the light of God's absolute unity, nevertheless, there's an added level of joy that can be uncovered specifically from within the constriction and the separation of this worldliness. And this is after the Alter Rebbe told us that each and every person has the ability of uncovering this joy and contemplating it and drawing it down into their hearts. And that joy comes about by way of the singular core of all mitzvos, which is emunah in Hashem. And now the Alter Rebbe continues, and he says, not only is there a joy that's going to come from that place of self-nullification, from that place of chachma, odzos, there's going to be an even deeper form of joy, a doubled form of joy. The remarkable ascension of pleasure towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the Ketores, that comes about when we draw our faith down into places of concealment, which is the subdual of the other side of concealment, of sadness, and the transformation of darkness into light. Because that darkness in this world is the darkness of concealment and the husks of this worldliness and its physical nature that darken and block out the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, up until the arrival of redemption, which is going to be the end of darkness, the revelation of God's kindness that's going to remove all of the impurity from the world. And what's going to be revealed in its stead is the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all of existence and its separation is going to come together in a state of unity. specifically in the places that are outside the land of Eretz Yisrael, where the air is impure and it's sullied and it's filled with all forms of concealment and darkness, that in truth there's no greater joy and happiness that ascends to God like the light and the joy that emerges specifically from the darkness itself. And this is the secret of the pasuk, that Klal Yisrael is going to be joyous in the actions that they do in the world that they live in. Meaning to say that each and every person who lives with the spirit of Israel, who has a neshama, should be in a state of profound joy, specifically by dint of the fact that we live in this dira b'tachtonim, this lowly place, which is the world of physicality, asiya gashmit mamish, something that feels very real and congealed. And this is the language of Yismach Hashem ba'oisav, plural language, because this world is a world of plurality and separation and multiplicity. This worldliness and all of its scatteredness, which is filled with all forms of concealment that take us away from happiness. It's referred to as the domain of dispersion, Rosh Hashanah, the mountain range of separation, Turi de Parduda, the Paruda. But what we have the ability to do is to transform it into light, to take all of the separation and transform it into a site of unity, and to draw the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down into that place. This is the simcha that comes specifically from this worldliness, when we can't operate with that unified vision of divine light, when we find ourselves in the day-to-day, we find ourselves caught in the traffic jams. We have to draw down this light. We have to have Yismach Yisrael ba'oisav. We have to be able to uncover the light of Mashiach in this place itself, to be mahapich liyesh. And so even though the goal is to obviously transform yesh into ayin, and that's the chachma, that's the core of all things, to live from the upper perspective of divine unity and all rightness that we can download at the beginning of our day, that rests at the core of our consciousness, no matter where we are. And with practice, it becomes something that's viable, that shavisi Hashem lenegdi tamid, that divine equanimity, that divinely rooted equanimity. At the same point, we also have to know the secret of finding joy from within this worldliness. That joy is not for the malachim. Joy is not outside of this world. Joy is very much in this world. This comes back to the original contradiction that we brought up in the first year, which is whether joy comes from chachma or joy comes from bina. Does joy come from nothingness, or does joy come from somethingness? And what we're seeing now is that it goes both ways. And ultimately, we're going to see how they're both unified in a singular way. But the joy of nothingness is the chachma that comes about through self nullification and forgetting of this world and closing the eyes deep enough to get to a place where you're not bogged down by this worldliness, and you're able to live with the Shem Havaya, and you're able to radically affirm faith, and you're able to enter into the Oilamos, and you're able to enter into a place of the Ta'anug of Amunah and the Sha'ashuei Amunah, and you can live in Oilam Haba in that way, dragging it down into this world, into our own minds already now. And then there's also going to be the joy that comes mitzad habina, which is going to be that place of changes and colors and disorientation, and specifically down here in the Ketoras, that we're going to have to elevate ourselves by way of drawing down this pre-existing shape of joy, a radical affirmation of faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unified process. And then suddenly all of the concealment is going to be transformed into a site of revelation. And the simcha amiti is going to come about from this place itself. From this place itself. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's where the joy is going to come from mitzvos, from human involvement, from engagement, from process, through up and down, building and breaking, closing and opening. That's the simcha amiti, to live with it even in this world when I'm not feeling the simcha, when I don't feel the bittul. And this brings us back, and with this we'll end, to a teaching from Rav Aaron Halevi Meistra Celia that we've quoted many times, Talmud Mufak of the Baal HaTanya, in his introduction to Shari Avoda, where he says that even though my Rebbe's main goal was to bring about this radical revolution of Chachma being available for all, and so that everybody can live from the perspective of Ein Oid Milvado, and that deep abiding sense of Lehisaneg al Hashem, and that everything is for the good, and that all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do is to enter into deeper and deeper layers of nothingness. At the same point, says Rav Aaron Halevi, it was not his way to dispel or to push away anybody's processes or anybody's attempts. That even though a person is continuously trying to enter into ayin, but they know deep down that they're entirely caught up within yesh, and they're still stuck within that self-orientation and egoistic positioning of self, And even though they're trying, they're failing, they're trying, they're failing, and everything is oriented towards their self nullification, that bittul hayesh, rather than true chachma. Nevertheless, says Rav Aaron Halevi, even though most people were doing it in the wrong way and not living with that level of chachma and enon mulvado, nevertheless, the Balatanya was machshir all of it, because the Balatanya revealed that it's specifically within the attempts at joy in this worldliness and the uncovering of the memory of joy in this worldly confusion that the deepest pleasure is going to arise, specifically in our imagined joy, specifically in our dimyonos. And this is where Rav Aaron quotes such a beautiful teaching from his Rebbe, Yonasi Tamasi, that Yonah, that a dove, has also a language of ona'ah, of fraudulency or trickery, something that represents bina, not being able to live truly from the perspective of nothingness. But nevertheless, says Rav Aaron Halevi, my Rebbe says, Yonasi Tamasi, even though it's B'derech Ona'ah, and it's still in Bina, and you're still stuck within Yeshus, and you're still stuck within all of the fragmentation of this worldliness, and you're trying to find light in that place, nevertheless, it's totally beautiful in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's totally beautiful. Like the Mittler Rebbe said, that it's specifically this avoid of Bittul Hayesh, of drawing joy into the lowest places, of remembering joy in those places and elevating the sparks of the Ketores and transforming darkness into light and remembering faith from within a momentary sense of its opposite, that the most potent forms of divine light are going to ascend. And that's where we're going to be able to uncover the secret of Yishuv Hadas, of a settled mind that is able to return back to Chachma. And so Be'ezras Hashem, it works both above and below, the bittul of ayin and the descent back into yesh. Person has to be an expert in both running upwards into ayin, running upwards into nothingness, where I'm forgetting the world, and a baki b'shov, running downwards into the world, where I need to find joy within this world. This is ultimately everything. There's the Shem Havaya, which is the Shem Ayin Beis, the 72-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Chesed, which is Chachma, which is running upwards. And there's the Shem Membeis, which is the descent downwards into this worldliness for the sake of transforming it. Both are necessary. Both are the pathways towards joy in this world. And we find ourselves in Mitzrayim. The only preparatory stage to enter into Mitzrayim was the town of Goshen. That the Jewish people asked for the town of Goshen. What was Goshen? Goshen, the tzaddikim tell us, is the gematria of Simcha. That the preparatory stage for Simcha, the preparatory stage rather for exile, descending down into Mitzrayim, is receiving the secret of Goshen, receiving the secret of joy. That there's an everlasting joy of Chachma. It's always there. And then I can go down into Mitzrayim. Then I can fall down into this worldliness and the Meitzarim. Ve'ela shemos b'nei Yisrael habayim Mitzrayim. Ve'ela, the tzaddikim say, and the Rebbe quoted on Motzei Shabbos, is Gematria 42, because it's the Shem Membeis, the 42-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we descend down into Mitzrayim with. That's the place of Yesh, of Bina, of feeling the struggle and the concealment. But it's specifically from there that we are able to ascend back upwards into a place of Bittul. And when we become experts in both of these paths, we're going to figure out how to live with the secret of Simcha. That's why Yosis Alayach Eloikayach, Kimsois Chasan Al Kala, that there's a joy that comes from Yosis. Yosis is the gematria of 620, which is Keser, which is also the gematria of Tzafanta, which is concealment in this worldliness, within the struggle. But Yosis is also Yesh Yesh, because there's a secret that when we uncover the joy of somethingness in this world, in this Yesh, we also access the Shai Olamos that are available to us in the future. Shai 310 is also the gematria of Yesh. And that attaches us to the Yesha Amiti, which is the true source of vitality, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's a hidden path in which we can uncover joy in this world by remembering Emunah, by attaching ourselves to Goshen and then descending down into Mitzrayim. That's going to give us the ability of transforming darkness into light and clearing the path for Mashiach Tzidkenu, which is a secret of Ki B'Simcha Teiseu, that the joy that we cultivate within ourselves is the pathway necessary for Mashiach Tzidkenu to arrive individually and collectively, Be'ezras Hashem.